Well, welcome. This is Mark Mueller at Truth and Justice League podcast for a continuation of our vault stories. Most of these are stories of trials from my earlier days as a lawyer when I handled a wide range of cases. I'm here with Miss Denise Castro, my coworker, the VP of Truth and Justice League, and my co-host for today. So I'm going to tell a story, and you can ask me any questions you want.
Sounds good.
So this was another case back in the old days. This was in the early 80s. My first year or two of practice. It wasn't my first trial, but it was in the first half dozen. And it just seems like many of the most interesting cases I've ever had were those early cases. We didn't have any high profile, big dollar cases. We just took what we could get. And we ended up with interesting criminal cases and other types of DUI cases and things like that. And then every once in a while we get something else, and this was the something else. This was a case where I think we might have been appointed on this one because the mom didn't have any money, but we were representing the mom. It was a three-way custody divorce case, and it was involved is the couple, husband and wife, they were relatively young in their 20s, and he was a little older than her. He was older than her, but not too much. And they had a little kid. You can't remember if it was a little girl or a little boy anymore. It seems like it was a little girl. And they were fighting over this kid. Everybody was fighting over the kid, and it was kind of a bully war. Because we had the husband, he's saying he should get custody, and he had a good lawyer in town. And the wife, she had us, and it was our first year. Me and my friend Dennis Powell, who was great. Dennis was my secret weapon in those days, so he was there for this one. And the grandmother was from a very powerful family. The grandmother, the mother of the father of the husband, was from a very powerful family. Her brother had been the mayor, maybe wasn't the mayor even then. And so they had a fair amount of money and everybody knew who they were. And the not so quiet secret in the town was she was not really a nice person. She was, and this is not pejorative sexually, but she had at least one assault or fired a weapon at her lesbian lover and some jealous fight of some kind. So there was some drama.
Yeah, that definitely doesn't sound like a nice person.
This is drama in East Texas. So, so back in those days, people were a lot more in the closet. I mean, we've talked about race and things like that on this program, but this one was, the grandmother who's seeking custody was not a nice person.
Novella.
At Novella, and had assaulted and I think shot at her lesbian lover. And of course, this was all being tried to kept out of the evidence in the case. And, but I felt like this is a small town, and people probably through the rumor mill could tell there was some wild stuff, whether they made the paper or not. It's a small town. Come on.
But did grandma want custody?
Yes.
So wouldn't her character be relevant
Yes.
in a custody case? I mean, how are we not
Totally.
going to include this in the...
Totally.
Okay.
So then grandmother, she had more money. Okay. And I guess she gave some money to her son to represent himself. But then she hired the big wig lawyer for herself. And she hired a very experienced family law lawyer in Houston who was one of the professors at our law school who taught family law. Okay. So there we are, Dennis and I in Orange, Texas, and we're doing our first custody type case.
Against some fancy attorneys.
Against a fancy attorney and another guy that was a very prominent attorney in the town as well. And then us, we're in our first or second year out of law school. But anyway, we were in this one, and it was a hot one. And by then, Dennis and I had done a handful of trials and done pretty well. And we've got some coverage in the newspaper and the local stations about these cases that we had that we won criminal cases and stuff like that. And so we had really good, back in those days, our really good friends were like my really good friends were, and some of Dennis's were people that worked for the newspaper or the TV stations. We were all broke. None of us had any money. So we would all get together with these reporters and newscasters and stuff like that, just hang out. They were our friends. And they liked our cases, and they would give me coverage for my cases because they were always colorful, right?
Nice.
And I appreciated the coverage. So it was a mutual thing. Plus, I just liked them, and one of my best friends of all time was Kevin Carmody, who worked for the paper down there. And Margaret Toll, I think she lives in Austin now. She was a reporter down there too. And several of the people that were reporters and photographers for the newspapers then, Jim Cullen was another one. There were Pete, the photographer. And anyway, we were all buddies. We had no money. So it was like literally people would scrape together their coins out of the couch to get a 6-pack or 12-pack of beer, or we would run a tab at our client's bar, trade legal services, which might not have been worth what the beer was that we got because we didn't know what we were doing. But that was it. And so I think it was Margaret's mom. Margaret was one of the reporters. Her mom was a high school civics teacher, but it was this very colorful trial coming up. We didn't know it was a dog trial at the time. But we knew it was drugs. We knew there would be drugs, alcohol, and infidelity allegations and things like this. So Margaret told her mom, she said, that you should go take your class to watch this trial that Mark and Dennis are going to do. It looks really interesting and maybe be a little bit, novella type of thing, right? A little bit of sleaze and a little bit of, stuff sizzle in there. Big time lawyers on the other side, and then just us. But we were pretty scrappy and pretty, we were pretty Street Fighter kind of guys back then, right? And so anyway, so we're doing this trial, and the issues was who should get custody. At the end of the trial, the jury would have to answer the question of mother, father, grandmother, who gets custody, and then who pays child support. Everybody was claiming for child support. Everybody was going for custody. Our woman had no money. She was a sweet young lady, I think just got in over her head with these guys. But we're in this trial, and it was a big character case, and we were not supposed to get into grandma's stuff, but it sure was relevant as far as I could understand.
Of course. That
especially the violent stuff, and the other stuff is a little bit tougher, like the sexual orientation of parents and all this kind of stuff. I don't have an issue with it. But does it affect the way that the kids' friends handle it? It all has to be handled well, or people end up, being picked on because, of their circumstances, whatever. So it was complicated. And
remind me, around what year
this was like 1982.
I see.
Long time ago. So people weren't talking much about,
I see.
Back in those days, there was not much talk about gays and straights and all this stuff. I mean, obviously in the cities there was, and it still existed in the small towns. It always has. But it just was not up in front and personal. And so, and the judge was very careful to be like, well, you guys better really watch it here, because this is a very fine line between character assassination and this and that and the other, and what's fair is to determine who's the better parent. Plus, these people were powerful people, so they were, I think there was a little of that going on. Is they were very careful. We don't want to have the mayor's sister smeared in this sleazy trial that was going to be, because it was going to be sleazy. And so
you're like, but judge, could we go ahead and think what's best for the child
right.
here?
Exactly. And
put that aside, but let's bring up people's criminal records.
Yes. Yeah. So we had the courtroom was actually, we had like 20 something students in the courtroom watching this trial. And we did not know it was going to all unfold. We knew there were going to be allegations of he said, she said they had sex with somebody else or this or that, cheating and this and that. And then we knew there were going to be allegations of drugs and alcohol and all that kind of stuff. We knew that. Behind the scenes, we knew Grandma had had an assault thing with her lesbian lover, and that would be very provocative. I don't think that would help their case. We didn't know any of the stuff, which stuff was going to come into evidence. We knew drugs was going to come in, and we knew they were going to be smearing drugs and sex for sure. And that was the grandmother's position was like, I'm a mature human being. These guys are all too young, and they're just they don't know what they're doing, and they're not good for the child. So, but I'm better for the child. Grandma, who was had assaulted somebody because of a lover's spat, right? So it's like, wow, this is wild. Like, what's more dangerous here, right? So, and little kid. So we're proceeding for that. We pick the jury and had to kind of gently get into this stuff, but we did talk about there's going to be conversations about sex and drugs and things like that, and people behaving, what they consider to be inappropriately, and what's in the best interest of the child. And that's your job, is to determine what's in the best interest of the child. Okay. And once again, situation where we were still in our first year or two, so still pretty much green as lawyers, and our first trial like this. So, and here's our professor, okay, who's on the other side, right? So he's going to know more law than we do, and he's been down this road before.
I mean, you would hope.
He's a high.
No, I'm kidding.
He was smart. He was smart, and he knew his way. He was a high priced Houston lawyer,
Of course.
and expected to win. Okay, nobody expected really the dad to win. Okay, because we just knew he was not a good guy, but he had a good lawyer. So a smear contest, who knows what's going to happen?
What made him not a good guy?
He was abusive. He was a jerk. So we're doing this trial, and she testifies, and she's testifying. I think she did a pretty good job of testifying about her, his behavior and documenting what happened and how she, was young and kind of got pulled into this thing and didn't know how to get out of it. And he was the guy that had the money, and he kind of controlled her, made her do things she didn't like to do and what have you. It's, novella style stuff. Grandma was testifying, and that was very interesting. We had to be very careful about that one. But I don't remember all the details of it, but what we were trying to do with grandmother was to establish she hadn't done a very good job of raising her own son. Okay? And so much so that she was trying to get custody of the kid because her own son was a terrible parent. And did that have something to do with the fact she might not have been a very good parent either, and that he might have been subjected to things in his own upbringing that were contributing to where he is now? In so many words, right?
Yep.
In so many insinuations, so many words, that the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. And she's just because she's got money doesn't mean she should win this case, because you got to stop the train someplace. And he obviously was a dirtbag. Okay, so much so she's trying to get possession over him. Okay, I think the cross-examination of her went pretty well, because she was used to being a boss. She had a very domineering personality, and she was pretty volatile, and she was not used to being questioned. So, and she had a short temper. So the goal with her was to prod her, poke her, and irritate her until she, started showing her colors, so to speak, which I think we did. But, that was all. We're trying to judge, did we do a good job or not, but we thought they could get it, and we thought Mom did a pretty good job of testifying. Okay, now here's where it gets real interesting. So he's testifying, like I think he was last in the case. Like, we were close to the end of the case, and Mom had smeared him pretty good, but she did a good job. She was sweet. She was, I thought, honest witness, and she just she didn't have a lot of power, but she was, I think, trying to be a good mom. And now it's Dad's turn. I just remember that he was, of course, denying and minimizing everything, right? Like, oh, I might have smoked reefer a couple of times, but nothing else. And, just he was understating everything. And it was like pretty obvious. Then he tried to say she was the abuser. Okay. Like she abused him. Like that's what she abused him. And she was like this little girl. He was bigger than her. It was kind of ridiculous.
Yeah.
And she was also kind of like, you never know from people, right? But she seemed pretty meek and mild. She just didn't seem like she wasn't the one that would be starting all this stuff. But he tried to turn around and said, she beat me up and she assaulted me and she was mean to me and blah, 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 blah. Also doesn't look good for the guy in that kind of environment, to play the victim where it might not be true. Doesn't look good. Okay. Cause it's like, come on, guy, it's just like old school. Old school doesn't sell so good. We do know that women can abuse men.
Yeah, of course.
Of course. We're down in East Texas, and it's just his word. And his word is not very good anyway. So it's not looking, to me.
Do you feel like the jury was not buying it?
I felt they were not buying him at all. But then I'm pushing him like on this stuff, like, because I thought he went like too far by saying that she was all this stuff. And, he couldn't stop her and all this. It was just like, and she's like this little, like this, right? She's like, and she's 19, 20 years old. And I'm going, this doesn't fit, right? Then the guy goes, well, that's not all. I came home one time and she was having sex with a pit bull.
What?
I looked over at my partner, like, what the heck did she just say? Yeah. He said, yeah, she has, sex with the dogs and blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. She's a terrible human being. Like, wait a minute. Okay. Time out, judge. Okay. We never heard any of this before. And so I'm like going, oh my God. What if we're wrong? What if this guy's got pictures or something
That's
like
wild.
this? Oh my
That's
God. What if he's got a
disgusting.
witness or something
You
like
just
this?
lost your case.
Oh my God. In the worst possible way,
Oh my
right?
God.
And we're being all cocky because we're like
Yeah.
winning the case, right? And he brings out this. Judge gives us a timeout. We go across the street and we're talking to our client. And they go, look, you got to level with us on this one. If there's any chance at all that there's anything like this happen at the house and he can prove it, we're completely toast. Okay. So better not be, no drunken, you don't know what happened and you woke up and there was a dog playing with your feet or something like that. None of that business here, right? So I didn't say it like that, but just asked her straight up, is this true? And she goes, absolutely not. There's no way. This has never happened. This is crazy. He just makes stuff up. She goes, just completely makes stuff up. I promise you. I say, because if he's got some evidence, you're going to lose and we're going to look bad and it's going to be bad, bad, bad. She goes, no, I promise. This just never happened. He just makes this stuff up. He's nuts.
Can someone be held liable for just lying on the stand like that?
Well, yeah, if you can prove it, perjury, but they don't press perjury charges too often. So I took her at her word, went back in the courtroom, and I said, no, when you were telling me this story about your wife, catching your wife with a dog, I mean, did you call police or anything? Did you file a report? Did you call the Child Protective Services? No. I said, did you take pictures of anything? Did you take the dog to a vet? Did you move out? Did you kick her out? Nothing. And I said, so you did nothing. You took no pictures. You made no reports. And you thought this was the most disgusting thing you've ever seen in your life. And you would never want your child around somebody like this, or is it okay with you? Like after that, you still want to be with her? You know, like what, you know, that was the tenor of it was, you've got to be kidding me.
Mm-hmm.
So basically what you're just saying this with zero proof that it ever happened and you did nothing about it. And do you want to take custody away from your wife because you said this happened and you have zero proof? Good. And on top of that, you say she beats you. And on top of that, you try to deny that you did all this stuff. When your own mother
Doesn't want him to have custody.
doesn't want you to have custody.
Mm-hmm.
I think Dennis did closing arguments. And he's, you know, so good. And he put it all together and got the jury to think about what was really going down here. And of course the jury goes out. We're sitting there going, "Oh, did we stretch too far or did we do it just right?" Right? And meanwhile, the students have gotten quite the earful because they thought they were going into for a little bit of a drama case, but they got the whole shebang.
Yeah.
And it was pretty lurid testimony, right? I mean, I've never heard that. I was like, what the heck?
That's wild.
Oh my God, right? Nobody ever taught you that in law school. Like, how do you respond to those kind of questions? So the jury goes out and they come back and, you know, they have to answer these questions. They gave custody to Our Lady and they ordered the grandmother to pay child support.
What?
Yes. And they ordered the baby to be turned, the child, little girl, to be turned over, I don't know, after the weekend or something like that. The next week, they'd turn her over for Our Lady to get custody. And then there was, you know, going to be visitation and stuff like that. But primary custody was our person, and she was getting child support from grandmother.
Nice.
Which I thought was good.
Yeah.
The turnover was supposed to happen, and Dennis calls me up, and he goes, "Well, guess what happened?" I go, "What?" He said, "They took off with the kid." Despite the order, the judge said, "You got to turn him over," they took off with the kid. The grandmother, the son, that side of it, took off with the kid and was gone. They couldn't find him. And it was like, well, what do we do now? And so we were going, this is a violation of the law. You know, it's kind of kidnapping.
Kind of, it is.
You know, and so
I mean, this is Amber Alert kidnapping situation.
right, exactly,
Yeah, like, what the heck?
exactly.
Yeah.
But again, it's local politics.
Mm.
And, you know, this is the mayor's sister. So there was some behind the scenes negotiations going on because we're pressing charges with the, you know, feds, the district attorney. We're calling the newspapers, you know, we're going to do all this stuff, right? Of course, we can get stuff like that in the newspapers, you know, like family fails to deliver the child, you know, Mueller and Powell calling the authorities, you know, those kind of things. And so I don't know, remember how many days before it happened, but they then brought the kid back. And that's the last I ever heard of it. So we won. It was my last custody case ever. It was very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, the newspaper reporters had a field day with it. And the kids that were there for the civics class learned that government's not so boring.
Yeah.
Court's not so boring.
Mm-hmm. Did grandma and the dad get in trouble at all for taking the kid and kind of violating
That's a good
court
question.
orders?
Not really.
That's crazy.
They kind of got a pass. It was kind of one they got
That's ridiculous.
They got a slap on the wrist, you know, go bring them in and, you know, we're going to give you a few more days to do it and what have you. But no, they kind of got off. It was a power play.
Yeah.
You know, but it's also, you see this in court a lot with things that are just like, they're just things that happen and they're not right. But if you prosecuted everything that happened in all these things, especially in family courts, you'd be in court every day. Because, yeah, people those are hot zones. And people do stuff. They get very emotional. So that's that case in Orange, Texas, and my first and only child custody case.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks for sharing.